Right, so I think we're going to kick this off now. Welcome, lovely to see you all. Well, I wish we could see you all. Lots of great things about doing virtual webinars, but not being able to read the audience is not one of them. So warm welcome to our best practice on flexible recruitment. As you know, I hope this is part of our programme to mark National Work-Life Week, which Working Families has run for over a decade. We started it and we continue it as a way to shine a spotlight on what employers can do to help parents and carers get a healthy balance between their work life and home life. Each year we see organisations from all sectors and sizes take the opportunity to focus on the well-being of their teams and celebrate good ideas and innovations. So I hope you're all taking part too. We'd love to hear what you're doing. So please do share using the hashtag WorkLifeWeek. We've got three great speakers, as I mentioned, who are going to share their experiences and learnings with us. But before they do, I want to kick off with a few reflections from us at Working Families about what flexible recruitment is, why it's so important, and most importantly, what best practice looks like in flexible recruitment as we all grapple with the challenges of coming out of the pandemic into a new hybrid model of working for many of us. In terms of best practice, one place we always look at our employer members who take part in an annual benchmark survey to look at what's happening across different sectors. What we can see from our 2021 benchmark is that there's a lot of great work already happening. 68% of the employers in our benchmark publish details of flexible working options on their website. 51% carry out a job analysis of the position prior to advertising it, one of the most important elements, as we can see from the poll. You guys already know that. 38% of our benchmark employers use happy to talk flexible working logo. It's a really simple logo and it just starts those conversations off. Do have a look at our website. There's a lot more about using that, and it's free to use and open for everyone. 67% of our benchmark companies discuss flexible working as part of the onboarding process, with the idea that they are making sure new starters are aware of all of the flexible working options available. And so there's, as you can see, some fantastic work already going on. We've also just done some polling to mark National Work-Life Week. We wanted to find out how parents and carers are feeling about the balance between their work and home lives and their well-being as we come out of an extraordinarily tough 18 months for many of us, and for some of us, probably the worst 18 months they've ever been through. And one standout stat for me is that 85% of working parents agree that work-life balance is a top priority, and say it will influence their choice of job. Interesting, given what we've all learned about being at home with 2 under 5s, not in my case, but I think that's been terribly challenging. Employers who want to attract the best and the most diverse talent, including the 13 million working parents in the UK, need to sit up and take note if they're going to attract employees with caring responsibilities when they're recruiting. So we have 3 speakers. I'm so pleased to say they've agreed to share their experiences with us and give us some inspiration on how we can all look more closely at our flexible recruitment practices this National Work-Life Week and beyond. And they are Louise, Senior Employment Engagement Advisor at Arnold Clark, and Arnold Clark is the previous winner of the Best Flexible Recruitment Award. Ellie, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Ernst & Young, or EY rather, sorry, so old, I keep on using the old names. Previous winner of the Best Flexible Recruitment Award, and Justine, Recruitment and Retention Lead at NELFT, NHS Foundation Trust, who's one of our top 10 employers. So welcome all of you. We've asked them to share their thoughts in turn to kick us off. And as we go, do please pop any questions in the Q&A box. Please feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat box, but if you could put your questions in the Q&A box, that would be really helpful. We'll get to as many of them as we can. share your thoughts on Twitter, #WorkLifeWeek. And Louise, can I turn to you first?
So yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak today. So within Arnold Clark, some time ago now as a business, we set our objective to be an employer of choice. And for us, this really meant sort of going back to basics and examining every aspect of the employment life cycle. We understood that we weren't attracting the best talent into the business or retaining that talent within the business as well. And that was something that we needed to address. We knew we had to look at issues such as gender balance and inclusion. And what we found was that quite often, most of those discussions came back round to flexibility. You know, they were all sort of interlinked within those areas. We wanted to challenge and move away from what had become the norm for the motor industry, that it was very typically male dominated, long hours culture. And we knew that that wasn't giving us the competitive advantage of having the best people come to work for us, and was putting a lot of barriers in the way of diversity and inclusion for a lot of groups of people, and we knew that that was going to have an impact on the success of our business going forward. So, you know, we had no choice, but we needed to make changes, and we wanted to make positive changes to be progressive within this industry, which is, you know, for so long been held back by the traditions and the history within the motor industry. So as we all know, obviously throughout the pandemic, the way that we have worked and have come to work has changed quite dramatically, with many employees working from home or spending less time in the office. And as a result of that, we have carried out focus groups with our employees and managers so that we can be up to date and in putting forward a flexible arrangement that works for all of our employees. So we had been on a track doing lots and lots of work in terms of diversity, inclusion and flexibility. And obviously a lot of that had to change direction slightly with the pandemic. So what I'll talk to you about today is what we're doing now, what we've put in place sort of post-COVID really. So we're now able to offer a much more flexible approach for the whole group of our employees. And our approach is kind of made up of three parts really. So we looked at all the roles in our organisation and have split them down into three different areas. So we've got our employees that work on a fully flexible basis, and most of these employees are based at home for the majority of their role. So this suits departments such as software development, IT, our wages department, for example. There are occasions that they're required to come into an office location, but the majority of the time they work on a fully flexible basis at home. We have employees that work on a hybrid basis. So through doing the focus groups and speaking to our employees, we found that a lot of them enjoyed the flexibility that occasional home working gave them. But they also enjoyed days where they could come into the workplace and connect with their colleagues as well. They found that to be a really positive thing for them. So the hybrid approach gives that balance of days working from home in the office and working from home, and also coming into the office, depending on your working pattern. There's a different sort of requirement for that. And our final sort of approach to the final group of employees is what we call flex on premise. So this is for our employees where it'd be very difficult to operationally work from home. We are a retail business with physical showrooms, so we have a number of positions that we just couldn't have working from home. So if you think of like technicians fixing cars, car salespeople in the showrooms, etc., we need them to be in the physical environment, and it just wouldn't be possible for them to work from home. But we also recognise that life requires flexibility for these employees as well, be that to attend a parents' evening appointment, a doctor's appointment with a parent, whatever, or even if you just want to get your hair and nails done before you go on a night out. The reason for the flexibility is not what's important. What's important is that employees can have that freedom to request that flexibility. So for that group of employees, what we introduced is a system whereby they can request blocks of flexible leave up to 3 hours to their manager. It doesn't matter what the reason is, they put that in. The time off is paid and they don't have to make that time back. So it's flexible time that they can use to suit their needs as well, to try and be as fair and flexible to all of our employees. And that was quite challenging to sort of come up with that and get that put in place. But I'm really pleased to say we've seen a massive take up on that. We launched it in July this year, and we've had over 6,000 applications through from employees since we launched it. I'm happy to say the majority of these have been accepted, and our employees have been able to build that flexibility into their working lives. Managers can decline the applications, but only when there is a genuine business reason as to why it absolutely cannot be accommodated on that particular occasion. What we are also doing as well is working very closely with our managers to make sure that they, and coaching them through the sort of use of that system, and making sure that they understand the reasons behind the flexibility that's required, and the way that they should be using that, because what we don't want is for them to be sort of drilling down into the reasons behind why someone's asking and making a judgment call on, well, that's more important than that, or that's not important, you can stay and work on this occasion. So we're really trying to coach our managers to make sure that, you know, it's about the flexibility is the key. That's what they really need to remember. And if the employee can't be accommodated at that particular time, can we work with them to do something else? So really trying to sort of push that forward. We're still very much a family-run business despite having over 10,000 employees. So for us, when we talk about flexible working, we really want it to become so embedded within our culture that our employees, potential or otherwise, just understand that it's viewed as the norm. So our goal with having this approach is for every one of our employees to have a flexible working arrangement, regardless of their circumstances, that hopefully fits their lifestyle. From a recruitment point of view, in addition, we also use the Happy to Talk flexible working logo, which, as Jane mentioned at the beginning, is a really sort of simple thing that you can put on your job adverts. We've obviously used that for a number of years now, so that potential employees understand that we view that as a very important thing, but also that it's safe for them to have the conversation at that early stage, because, you know, most people with sort of working families or caring responsibilities, it's on your mind if you're going through a job application process that I really would like this job, but, you know, I don't want to take on a job that's in conflict with the responsibilities that you've got at home. So doing that definitely has been a great help. And when we implemented the logo on our adverts, we found that in areas of the business, so for example in our accounts functions or our sales administrations functions, where we were struggling to recruit strong talent, it opened up such a wider pool of talent in those areas, where people may have been in a career, then taking time out to have families and wanting to come back into the world of work, but needed that flexibility. So having that logo on there made them feel comfortable with that. And crucially for us, it made managers see how much wider of a talent pool they had access to, and they got it all of a sudden, and it seemed to click and they understood. So they're much more on board with having those conversations and accepting those flexible working arrangements going forward. So from an impact point of view on our recruitment, you know, we can see that even at the early stages of recruitment and selection, applicants that come to us understand that flexible working is not a taboo subject, and they can openly discuss their needs and they will be listened to. All of our new employees joining the business will be put into one of the 3 approaches that I've talked about today. So from the very beginning of their career at Arnold Clark, they can see that flexible working is really a way of life in the way that we operate as a business. And for the business, it's had a huge advantage of widening that talent pool to make sure that we're recruiting the best people for the job, which ultimately remains one of the key objectives, really. In terms of sort of approaching flexible working at interview stage, so pre-COVID, you know, we found that employees, applicants that felt brave enough would maybe bring that up at the interview stage. And if they did, that would involve conversations with the manager about the role and also the applicant's needs, and how we could try and sort of match those up and see a way, you know, a way forward through that. With the managers always being encouraged to it's only a definite no if there's absolutely no way forward. Is there not a compromise? Is there some way that we can meet these needs to get the best people into the business? What we find now is that applicants' priorities have shifted, and that more are inquiring about the hybrid way of working and opportunities to work from home. That seems to be very on the first question that's coming forward in that process. But thanks to our flexible approach that we have, we're finding it much easier then to sort of be able to discuss those needs with the individual applicant, but also with the manager as well, and sort of make that fit much easier. So we've achieved the successful implementation of the three sort of method approach into the company, and we'll continue to enhance the culture of inclusion and flexibility. But underlying everything is that we want to continue to make every employee aware that they can have a flexible working arrangement, and that as a business, that's how we want to operate. We know that that's going to create the most successful environment, so that's what we want to do. And going forward in the future, we will be sort of regularly reviewing the approach that we've put into place. It's still in relatively early stages, and we will continue to get feedback from our employees through focus groups and networks, etc., to try and pull that information. And if it's not working, try and find a fix for it, and look at different ways as the world evolves, as we all know it has done over the last 18 months, certainly. And again, we just try and continually to promote all the time through our communications and internet, etc., the work-life balance and the need for that, and for people to really sort of take that on board. I think I was asked for sort of top tips for what I would sort of do say in terms of a flexible approach to recruitment. And the main thing that we would really say is to listen to your employees. Most of the changes that I've talked about today have come about through sitting down and discussing with our employees, hearing what their needs are, talking to managers as well about potential issues, so taking on all areas of that and giving your employees a voice. But if you do listen to that, then to feedback and show that you've listened to that. So we very much use a you spoke, we listened approach to show that we are taking that on board and relaying that feedback on what we've done in response to that feedback. So that would be my sort of top tip really to share, would be to listen to employees and take their lead really with regards to it, rather than dictate an approach that may not fit everybody.
Got to take myself off mute before I can say thank you very much indeed, Louise. That was great. Yeah, I was really struck by this idea that you mentioned if somebody was brave enough to say something at interview stage. And you also talked about flexibility being something that everybody can have, because I think there always is that sense, isn't there, that flexibility is earned, and that the reason that you need flexibility is it going to be good enough.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's it. And there's still a lot of education with the managers going on within the organisation in terms of trying to make sure that that's not happening. So, we really want this approach to be a success. So we're doing a lot of careful monitoring and coaching with the managers and sort of making sure that that is coming across in that way and being used properly.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Louise.
No problem.
Ellie, if we can come to you next. It would be lovely to hear from you. And again, this is about recruitment, not carers. And I think you know that. I'm the only one who made that mistake. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. So, I mean, Louise gave such a great overview of a very different sector to EY, professional services, very different scale, family business versus a global sort of huge employer. I think we're one of the biggest employers of graduates and apprentices. And we have a huge number of people we hire every year into our schemes and as experienced hires. And we have for many years approached flexible working as a default, and very much like yourselves, we have always had that as our sort of logo at the bottom of our job adverts. But we all know that sometimes the reality doesn't match up to sort of what we necessarily put on there, and it is down to human interaction within the recruitment process that really does consolidate whether or not somebody feels comfortable either having the discussion around flexible working or understanding whether or not that's even something within the culture, because I think the culture is an important one. Within EY, I would say we have a huge number of micro cultures that go on simply because we are an amalgamation of lots of different bits of businesses. In some areas we are an audit practice, in others obviously we have more of a consulting feel. So within that, there will be norms that are set and that prevail. And so back to sort of what Louise was saying around sort of making sure that there are checkpoints throughout that process has been really important for us, and making sure that the onus isn't on the applicant or on the individual has been something that we've seen more success in, and part of that is about storytelling as well, equipping our hiring community to showcase where there are, you know, people who do really important roles, big roles, but actually they do it in a way that works for them. And I suppose we bucket flexible working into the formal type, and then there's obviously the informal, and there are many more informal types of flexible working going on than we would even know about. And I think, you know, that is down to us having lots of messaging going on around output culture. We're not a presenteeism anymore. I think those days are somewhat over, especially now after the pandemic. And so it's, you know, we've done a lot to highlight through campaigns and storytelling really the benefit of people fitting in very interesting ways, how they do manage these big roles and these big jobs, etc. I think what's really important, however, at recruitment stage for us has been to sort of also be realistic about the jobs. There are some jobs, you know, I'm thinking audit, busy seasons and those sorts of things, where sometimes that flexibility feels like it maybe goes more the other way. So, you know, the flexibility is actually, yes, you can leave, you can go and pick up your children, whatever it might be, but we might need you to sort of log on in the evening. And I think it's also being transparent about that at the outset, that makes it feel authentic. And you know, you don't want people leaving 6 months into, you know, the role thinking actually that this flexible working arrangement isn't working for them. So it's about being honest about what the job entails. And I think on that point, we are working obviously with clients directly, you know, banks, insurers, oil, government, etc. And we are mirroring what the demand is there as well. And so we need to mirror the clients in the market. And we are definitely seeing a move for our clients to not necessarily need us on site. So I think that's been hugely positive on the back of the pandemic. And I, you know, from a definite war for talent, we are forever struggling to get talent, you know, in at all levels of the organisation, because, you know, there's a huge amount of work going on actually, you know, within our clients to help them transform their businesses, etc. And so they want us to mirror what they're doing, but equally it's an education for them around, you know, you're not necessarily going to see these people always on your client site. And that was a bit more sticky pre-pandemic. I think there was a bit more feeling of, if I can see you, then you're doing the job. Whereas now I think, you know, the one thing that perhaps is good that has come out is acknowledgement that we're much more aware of sort of home working does work and flexibility people. And I think from a gender perspective, it's really important to say, you know, just make this point that it isn't a gendered conversation. It's definitely, I know we're hearing many more fathers who want to be more active with their kids and, you know, be able to do all the things that, you know, flexible working enables. And so the tide is starting to change, and I think that's, you know, a change for good. So we want to keep that momentum up. The risk, I think, is slipping into back into a feeling that, you know, if you're in the office, you're going to get along. So we're keeping a close eye on that as well. You know, the networking that sort of might preclude some people who've gone, you know, more into a flexible working sort of pattern. But, you know, those are things that we can keep an eye on, and I think, you know, we'll be tracking, and most organisations should have an you know, an eye on that as well. In terms of my top tips over the years, I think it's been really about this storytelling piece that does seem to make the difference. If you can see it, you can be it, that sort of feeling that, you know, I'm not making any assumptions about the type of people that might want to talk about flexible working, because I do think generationally that people are changing. I think what we wanted when we were entering the world of work is very different now versus, you know, graduates coming in, and the reasons for their wanting to work flexibly are very different. And unless we change our approach, then we're not going to get the best talent. And it's fascinating to hear what some people use, you know, their flexible working hours for, or, you know, why they work flexibly. And it isn't just about caring, it's about other things now. So we have to move with the times in that respect as well. So I think interesting to see how this will play out as we come out of the pandemic, and really hopeful that there'll be some positive things that we'll all take out of it.
I'm always so engaged by what people are saying that I forget to take myself off mute. Thank you so much, Ellie. That was absolutely fascinating. And again, what I found really interesting was that you are also talking about business needs in the same way that Louise was talking about business needs. And the more I think we focus on that, the more widespread it will become. I also thought your conversation about microcultures and the norms that might spring up in different parts of the business, particularly for an enormous employer like EY, really interesting too. And yes, love the top tip. If you can see it, you can be it. So thank you very much, Ellie. And now we're going to come on to Justine. So Justine, over to you.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm going to come at it from a completely different angle, completely different background. So the NHS is completely a different specialism, and like you're saying, Ellie, about the recruitment challenge, I think NHS is probably far worse, if I'm honest. There's a shortage of people entering the professions, shortage of qualified staff. And because of the way the NHS is set up, we've all got the same terms and conditions. So what one trust is paying will be the same as what another trust is paying, the same as the pensions, the same benefits. So you can't even attract the best talent by being, with pay and things like that. So what we really need to do is be a bit creative and look at our whole branding now. And this is why we came to Working Families in the first place. We was looking at our non-pay rewards. How can we market ourselves as being the employer of choice? Looking at the age profile of the NHS, we're predominantly female, I'd say 80% female, and predominantly people age group between 30 and 50. So we're looking at people that would either be parents or carers. So I don't need to explain that the business need to have flexible working, the figures, and that's talk for itself. The other issue with recruitment in the NHS is a lot of people work on bank and agency because they're getting the flexibility. So we had to look at how can we attract these people and make and compete with the people that would chose to work in this way. Another thing with the pandemic, there was this new sort of found interest in careers in the NHS. I think at the start of the pandemic, the Health Careers website had so many hits of people looking for a second career, looking to come back. So we had to do something quick to sort of capitalise on this newfound interest and sort of look at different pools and opening up different wider talent pools. So we looked, we started advertising the flexible working. So obviously we put the Happy to Talk flexible working logo. We put a strap line into our job advert saying, okay, this job may be advertised as full-time, but talk to us about the flexible working options. And yeah, we started to, the other reason, sorry, going back to the business case, people were leaving, citing work-life balance as a reason for leaving. So, there was something we need to do internally as well. So yeah, we started to advertise, and first thing we did was amended our flexible working policy to say that we would flexibility from day one, which was agreed. We had the board level agreement, and it was about how we cascade this down and how we could persuade our managers that this was the right thing to do. To prove this, I think we did one experiment. We had a vacancy in, for community nurse position, we had 2 vacancies. We put one out just full-time, we put one out with flexible working, just to see what the difference would be in terms of applications, so we could actually prove to managers that, try and see things a little bit different. So that really worked. The other thing with the impact on recruitment, we have had more applications since we've been starting to do that. We've been doing a lot of work on our employer branding. So we was asking people before we went this, like, what made you apply for NELFT? And doing that at the beginning and doing that after, the reason people were joining was because of the perceived work-life balance as well. So that was quite good. And again, it was about showcasing areas that were working well, and trying to encourage managers to look at things, look at a job in terms of objectives and not as hours, which was the biggest barrier I think we had with staff. So how did we approach it? as well as having the education with managers and trying to sort of look at our recruitment training and getting people to think of that, we changed our interview template. So when they would give the successful candidate the call, rather than waiting for them to bring up the conversation about flexible working, when we offered the position, we would say, talk to you about the hours you want, and we will try our best to accommodate them. So I found that made it easier. And then having that at that stage, then if they chose to work part-time, it gave the manager at that stage the option to look at the next best candidate, to see if they could make up. For example, this happened in my team. I interviewed for a job that I had full-time hours for. My successful candidate said that they would like to work 3 days, so we got compressed days. So instead of just thinking in terms of hours, I've got this hours left, we sort of looked at the job and think, okay, if you can only do that in 27 hours, let's take one part of this job and see if I can get someone else to do that as a separate job. And that's how we try and, if I speak to a manager about it, I'll just say, look at the job, if you want part-time, then maybe it's one part that can go to somewhere else. And that seems to really work. But again, it's changing mindset. So we really have to sort of, keep the training and keep sharing every sort of success that we have. We've had some other good examples as well for one manager that advertised jobs full-time and the successful candidate only wanted to work school hours. Now that didn't fit in with the structure, it was a permanent job, but where the department was heavily relying on agency, she felt it was best to have someone to allow them to work term time and then just use the agency to cover the school hours, so they're making that savings. So anytime we hear of a good example, we all put that case study in, really trying to sort of encourage managers to think the same. So flexible working, again, it's embedded into our offer letters, our onboarding. So we ask people about flexible working when they sort of start. We've launched a carer's passport as well, so that flexibility will come with them. And flexibility is now part of health and wellbeing conversations that we have with our staff. So giving them the opportunity to talk to them, so it makes that conversation a lot more easier. In terms of what we've achieved so far, so NHS England, it's our governing body, they've now made it as part of everyone that works in the NHS statutory are allowed to ask for flexible working at day one. So now we've got that, it's not just our policy, it's now sort of guidance that all NHS should allow. But obviously, flexible working at day one doesn't help the managers because, once you've offered, then you've got to go back out. So we really try and encourage them to take it back step to the start of the recruitment process. We've got senior management buy, and we've realised that flexible working is just not a side, one thing that sits on its own silo. It's embedded into everything. It's embedded into our organisational development. We had a careers conference this morning. We're talking about part-time workers, because people have got that flexible working pattern, it doesn't mean to say that there's no career progression for them, and there is some issues. I know lots of the nurse apprentices, because they're full-time courses, it's really hard for people that work part-time to access that. So we spoke about some of the barriers in that way. So there are some issues that we would really like to iron out. So our next steps, we've now set up a flexible working change team, which has got representation from most of the areas, especially the ward-based roles, the roles where flexible working is not really seen, as we were saying before, about having that face-to-face and needs to be there. So we've got a change programme. We've got, I think it's an NHS thing, but we've got a QI team, they're quality improvement, so they're really good at sort of change process, so they're on board with it. So I'm confident we've got the right people in our team to make a difference for this. So we're at the early stages of that, but what we're now doing is gathering as much data, trying to identify the areas that need it most, and then hopefully come up with a plan. In terms of my tips for the audience, I agree with the tips that colleagues have shared, but I think communication's been fantastic for us, just starting small and celebrating every success that we've got, trying to find the case studies of people that work flexibility for the reasons that are other than parents, carers. I think someone else said, we've got people that do volunteer roles, or people that have gone back to university or done things, just so it's getting away from that manager's mindset of I can only ask if I'm a parent or a carer, so we've tried to sort of embrace that. And as well, not just look at part-time as an option. I think linking into our maternity policy, when people come back to work, they want to work part-time, but you know, when we look at our gender pay gap, you know, we want to encourage people to work full-time, but maybe do it on compressed hours might be a different option. So looking at the different ways that people can work flexible is probably, yeah, our biggest challenge at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Justine. And, you know, just to say from me and probably the entire population of the UK, thanks to the NHS for keeping us going. It's been an extraordinary time, and how you guys have managed to get through it, I think, is absolutely extraordinary. And I'm not surprised there's been a big interest in working for the NHS, in the sense that, you know, the patients that we've heard from really have appreciated the care and the attention.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been amazing. So yes, great to hear from you. Really interesting for me, those themes coming through about data, about talking to people, looking at the data, about job design, about culture through the organisation, all of those things that are being mentioned by everybody as we come through this. So now what we need to do is I'm going to work through some of these questions that I can see, and if you'll give me a second, I'm just going to open them up and see what we've got to. So we've got a question in from Becky, who wants to know, are there any requirements to be able to display the flexible working logo, the Happy to Talk flexible working? And I can answer that from a working family's perspective, no. But do go onto our website, because there is some guidance there on what's a good idea of how to use it, what will work well for you and what won't. Then a question to everybody. If you use recruitment agencies, do you find that they manage the candidates' expectations around flexible working? So Louise, can I come to you first? You do use recruitment agencies.
We don't use a lot of agencies, if I'm totally honest. We have an internal department that deal with that. We do for some positions, but I think our recruitment team are very good. If we do use recruitment agencies, then they will liaise with them and they will set out the expectations and you know, and put across to them what we offer as a business. So that would be put across to the agent to hopefully get that across to potential candidates. Obviously, it's kind of a bit beyond your control once it's gone out to the agencies as to what they're telling people, but hopefully then when they would come in to see us or talk to us or have a look at our website, they would quite clearly be able to see the approach that we take, because we do put it out there and communicate that a lot. So hopefully potential applicants would look at that first as well, and or speak to us and learn about that.
And Ellie, what about you?
So I think it's a bit of a mix. So I think, yeah, we don't use, our reliance isn't so much now on recruitment agencies, but we definitely partner with them where we need to. And we do spend a lot of time sort of discussing what, you know, on our policies are and you know, our approach. And although I would say in the interview process, the conversation would come up, it does come down to the offer point. So if you're working with a third party agency, it is at that point of offer that the conversation tends to get into the nitty-gritty. And so that's where you do need the recruitment agency to be really up to speed with what the, you know, what the role requirement is, what some good, like I said, good case studies of where it already works, but keep it realistic. You know, where the flex will be and where it won't. So yes, that we do it both in answer to the question. Yeah.
Thank you. And Justine, do you guys use recruitment agencies? No.
No, we don't.
So that's great. So our next question, I'm then going to aim at you, Justine, is how do you challenge hiring managers to think differently about a role when they have always thought of it as a full-time, no flexibility role?
Yeah, it is one of our biggest challenges, and what we find is managers will re-advertise like for like. So if a full-time person's left, then they'll want to advertise for another full-time person. I think this just comes back to job design, and so they're really good when it's new posts, because obviously our jobs have to go to a panel and sort of match it, so we sort of break it down that way. But yeah, it's really difficult. And it's about, we've got recruitment officers, so they're the ones that would advise their managers. So every time that a manager puts a job out, maybe if it's gone out to advert and they've not got anyone, then their recruitment advisors would say, perhaps try it this way. You know, that's what they're educated for. But the only way is education. Someone said to me, they're not bad managers, they're just uneducated managers. And so it's just about us telling them what would work in, like, yeah. And the most thing we can do is just learn by example. You know, the trouble when someone was talking about micro-organisations, although we're one big trust, we've got so many different localities. We've got about 5 or 6, and they're all sort of headed up a different way. What I find the best thing to do is the competition between those. If I say, like, at one of our localities, Barking and Dagenham are doing this way, the others will be, you know. So that's the way forward. We'll say, oh, if you tried it this way, Barking and Dagenham are doing that, and they'll be, oh, okay. You know, it seems to be, yeah. Competitiveness always helps as well.
Super, thanks. I love that idea of a little competition. Louise, how do you manage line managers who might need a little bit more encouragement or education?
Yeah, it really is that education. I think it's you know, breaking down the fact that, you know, what they're looking for is, you know, is the best person for the job, and that may not come in the package that they necessarily expected it to. Like Justine was just saying, you know, they expect that sort of like for like, and especially if they've had someone working in that role for a long time, and then they just expect somebody else to be delivered into that role that is, you know, is going to work in it in exactly the same way. And it's about kind of getting them to embrace that change and to think about things differently, and again, to sort of touch on what Justine was said, to look at the role and the way that it's made up and the work that's involved within that. And, you know, in some roles it is very, very difficult, but in other roles, you know, it's very, very easy to break that down and sort of say, you know, well, particularly if it slots into, say, you know, one of the easier, more flexible categories, to do that, it's much easier to get them to understand that. But it's that education, and one of the ways that we do that is to showcase examples of that through our communications with employees. So we have, you know, through the intranet and the newsletters and that sort of thing, we're constantly pushing that and showing that the different flexible ways in which our employees work, so that that's out there and people know it's part of the culture. But the managers certainly get pushback. You know, if they come back and say, no, I just need somebody that works these hours and that's it, then it's a full pushback and say, no, come back to us when you've had a little bit more creative thinking and we will help you with this, but you know, this is what we need to do. And the fact that we've got the, you know, the director buy-in from the business with the flexible approach, that, or if necessary, it has to come down to, well, this is the way the directors want the business to be run, so this is what you'll need to get on board with. So yeah. Always helpful.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I really also like this idea of thinking through, if it was a new job, how would we do it?
Yes.
As opposed to somebody's left and I'm just going to replace them like for like, which of course, you know, none of us are the same, which is always a good thing.
Exactly.
And thanks very much, Louise. Ellie, what about at EY? Do you have this as an issue?
I think we did. It's fairly frowned upon now if we ever would to get that sort of feedback, and partly because the tone from the top has been fairly firm around, we're an output driven business. You know, we do as Louise was saying, and Justine, you know, the element of storytelling is good, but there is that also making it a proactive conversation rather than a onus on the individual to sort of come and ask. So we proactively ask, you know, does this individual need flexible working arrangement, and not also making it always a formal one. It actually, I think, probably quite refreshing in some ways, because it isn't just about reduced hours, it's about, you know, doing this in a way that works for you, and you know, back to the whole challenge for working mothers. Historically, it's been around sort of, you know, women often dropping those days. there's some great research now that we all, often talk about around how productive women coming back in from, periods of maternity leave are. They do full-time jobs, and within, reduced hours or flexibly. So having those proof points that sort of bring the outside in is really important as well. Just to if you ever do get that back from hiring managers. But I would say at EY now, it would be fairly taboo if we were to get things like that back now. But we've been on this journey for some time.
Yeah. Our head of employer services, Kirsty, always says that if people have worked flexibly, if parents have worked flexibly before they have babies, they're much more likely to work full-time and flexibly after they've had babies, because they know what is possible and what's not possible, which I've always found really interesting. Louise, we've got a very specific Arnold Clark question, which is, your flex on premises, is there a limit as to the number of requests made per year?
No, we don't have a limit on the number of requests. So employees can put those requests in and as many times as they want to that particular month for those 3-hour limits. And it may well be that they're only saying, I only need an hour, or I need a 2 hour, or, or I need the full 3 hours. But they can put, it's unlimited, they can put as many requests as they want to in. We just felt that sort of putting a lot of parameters in took away from it the flexibility. Effectively, if we start to say you can do this but you can only do it once a month, and it kind of just pays lip service to it, then it's not really opening that flexibility up, that the other two categories had that more flexibility.
Great, thank you. If I can just go back to the question of fairness, it is one of the questions that we've been asked a couple of times now, and certainly for all of you have talked about the fact that flexibility is for everybody. It's not for a particular group of people. But if we can think about maybe in the context of working from home as opposed to place-based work, do you have issues with fairness, and how do you deal with those? Or perception of things being unfair for one group and fairer for another group? Ellie, do you have any of that happening at EY?
Oh yeah, we do, and I think it's fascinating at the moment because lots of organisations are coming out with their sort of statements around, this is what, this is how the new world of work is, and this is we're in this new hybrid working world. There's all that, we talk a lot about personas, and we've done, lots of organizations have modeled the sort of scenarios that people will want. You might find some people are full home working, and that's just going to be how they want to operate, and then there might be others that have a hybrid model of that, and some that are going to be perhaps more of an office-based individual. And within that, there is going to be tension, I think, because depending on the job roles and individuals who are more prevalent within those types of roles, I'm just thinking more senior individuals, they may have more men in those roles, for example. We don't want to end up in an environment where actually within an office environment, we only have our sort of senior folk or people who work in one bit of the business, and actually they're a certain demographic, and actually I'm just going to be provocative here, and all the women are at home or anything like that, so, and actually the fairness element becomes really complicated then, because perhaps it's those that are in the office that are sort of going, well, it's not fair that I can't do this, but actually there are others who are sat at home going, I'd like a bit more of that actually, but now I'm sort of being told I'm a full home worker now, and I don't necessarily know if I want that. So I think, this equity and equitable access to working the way you want to work is going to become more and more hot topic. And I don't think organisations have necessarily got a roadmap through it. I think we're all sort of finding our way. I think some organisations are being more back to the presenteeism than others. And that's where I think people will vote with their feet equally. I think that's where organisations that are saying, right, we're back to the old way, potentially I think they're going to lose that long term. But that's slightly off topic of fairness, but it's an output of it.
Absolutely. the 85% of the people that we polled saying that work-life balance was really important for them, and they were going to vote with their feet in terms of looking for new roles. Justine, do you have issues in terms of perceived fairness?
Yeah, it's so difficult with us, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. People working from home, and obviously there are the jobs that can't be done at home. Even some of the clinical roles, you know, even we was doing some clinics were doing online. So, you know, some roles were able to sort of have a little bit more flexibility in them. We've gone for the hybrid model and we've listened to what staff want, but that's fine for most of, I'd say 80% of the trust. But obviously we've got a few wards and things like that, and we need to have the people there, you know. So I do feel bad that, you know, we've got a fantastic health and wellbeing offer, but some of these people that need to be on these, they cannot access it. So there's this thing about fairness across the trust anyway. So as part of this flexible working change team, these are going to be our hotspots, because I'm sure that amongst all of these people, there will be some bits of flexibility. At the moment, how the wards work is you work, they've set rotas because they need to have a safer staffing levels and things like that. But what we want to do is start working as a team and find out actually, what do you want to do? You know, how can we work and let them negotiate their rotas between them? And I think that's been seen in other trusts where they've done that and worked well. What we've found is there'll be lots of people with childcare responsibilities maybe working a night shift because it's the only way they can get the flexibility, and then that's not right either, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of, yeah, it's unfairness, but then people will say, actually, this is what I signed up to, you know, I'm not going to get that because, you know, my patient comes first, I'm always here for that. So it is, I see it as unfair because I'm one of these people that can work flexibility and they can't, but it's not actually in the wards. They just see it as part of their job, but it's definitely something that we want to find, that even if it's a small bit of flexibility, I'm sure that every job has got that little bit of flexibility in it. So that's our next challenge.
Thanks very much, Justine. Louise.
Mm-hmm.
What about at Arnold Clark?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've really tried to, through listening to the employees and what it is that they were looking for, we've obviously tried to work with them, but also look at the roles that we've got and how it fits in terms of the environment that we operate in, being a retail environment. Not everybody's always going to be happy with where they've slotted in, and it's not always going to work for everybody's circumstances. And I think we're not trying to go for a sort of three-size-fits-all situation. We still encourage employees that if they're struggling with that, or if they need to talk to us about their flexible working, go and talk to your manager, come and speak to the people team. We want to help as many people as we can, and we certainly don't want people, like you said, to vote with their feet and leave because they think this flexible arrangement is so inflexible for me that I can't do what I need to do. So, you know, we're still very open to that, and as I said, you know, before when I was speaking, we're still very much a family firm, and one of our values is family, and about sort of nurturing those employees and looking after people. And we know people's circumstances change and can change quite suddenly. Thinking about people, for example, with caring responsibilities that can come overnight, literally, we strongly encourage that communication to come and talk to us, and don't think that that's an approach that we've taken and that's it, that's where you slot and there's no movement within that. There's always a conversation to be had and an accommodation to be made if we can possibly do that. Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you, Louise. Mm-hmm. Well, everybody, we've got 4 minutes to go. I could carry on for another hour at least, but we won't. I'm going to come back to each of you in turn, and I'm going to ask you to think of, you have discussed your top tips, but is there a word or a phrase that would describe your recruitment and what works best for you in terms of flexible recruitment? Ellie, maybe it's a key learning point.
Yeah, just make it obvious, make it for front and centre of a conversation about, as much as you would a salary, you know, how do you like to work, how within the parameters of the job, and the reality of the deliverables, what would good look like for you? Are you somebody who likes to work at home or needs some flexibility? Have that conversation in an open way as part of the negotiation, I think, at entry. That would be my tip.
Brilliant, thank you. Justine?
I would agree with Ellie. It's all about that conversation, isn't it? And just, I don't think for us, flexibility is not, it's not a benefit. And this is the thing, it's not something, it's something that, well, now in the NHS, we've got a right for it now. So it's how it's embedded into everything.
Brilliant, thank you. And Louise?
I think I would echo what Justine and Ellie said in terms of communication, but I would also add to that sort of challenge as well, to not be afraid to sort of challenge the norm, and be constantly sort of looking at what the next evolution is going to be within that, and be sort of looking to challenge what we've always done, you know, with managers and policies and everything. That we should be looking at how the world of work is changing and how we can change to get ahead of that. And it comes down to that kind of, you know, employer of choice and war of talent. We want the best people in, so you've got to be ahead of your game to do that.
Yeah, great.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We are, again, you know, I'm a Strictly fan, so it's the J word for me, but we are clearly all on a journey to find out what flexible working is going to be looking like for all of us, both to meet business needs and to meet the needs of individuals going forward. So all that is left is for me to say a huge, big, warm thank you to everyone who's come along today to join our webinar. I hope you've been inspired, as I have, and invigorated by some of the ideas that you've heard today. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter on our website to stay in touch with our work and our future webinars. And if you aren't already an organisational member, then do consider it. We think we can add all kinds of huge benefits to your business, particularly around flexible working, and happy to talk flexible working. Finally, biggest thank you to our panelists, Louise, Justine and Ellie, for being so open, so engaging, and sharing your experience with us today. You've all reflected too on the bits that your organisations haven't yet got perfect, and that I think is always so nice to know that we all have learning to do. Everybody, enjoy the rest of National Work Life Week. Please use it to reflect on the time that we've had over the last 18 months. And let's hope that we are building a future where we can all better support one another as we move forward into our new world. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.